Welcome to All About Art. My name is Alexandra, and I'm an art historian, curator, and writer. Within this podcast, topics relating to art history, cultural policy, the art sector, as well as a large range of other art-related topics will be covered. Conducting critical discussions, having entertaining exchanges, or just enjoying some relaxing chats, All About Art is where you'll find it all. Join me in exploring and developing cultural discourse. Welcome to another episode of All About Art. In this episode, I sat down with Dr. Alexandra Hodby, head of programs at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. Yorkshire Sculpture Park is one of the most distinctive arts institutions in the UK, and indeed in Europe, being the largest sculpture park on the continent. Set across 500 acres of West Yorkshire countryside, it has worked with over 1,000 artists across its 49-year history, nearly 50 next year, and the landscape itself is as much a part of the experience as the work within it. In this conversation, Alex takes us inside what it means to program at that scale and in that context. We talk about her path to the role, including her earlier time at YSP and what brought her back, and what makes programming in an outdoor setting so fundamentally different from working in a traditional gallery or a museum. We get to know how YSP builds and sustains its artist relationships over time, how accessibility plays out when your gallery is essentially a landscape, and how the broader conversation around land, ecology, and heritage has shaped the curatorial direction of the program. We also talk about what it takes to build a career in outdoor arts programming, a world that is, I think, more creatively demanding and potentially more rewarding than people often realize. Thank you so much to Alex for coming on the podcast. Before we dive into the episode, I want to take a minute of your time to mention that All About Art is on Patreon. We are mostly volunteer-led, but in order to cover running costs and other expenses, we make it possible for our lovely listeners to support us, ranging from £1 a month to the price of an oat latte a month, or on the higher end, the price of a Sunday brunch per month, depending on the tier you want to choose. If every person who listens to the podcast signed up for the £1 tier on our Patreon, we would be able to sustain the podcast while also having scope to produce episodes more frequently and expand our activities in demystifying the professional arts sector. So, if you want to receive early access to episodes and behind-the-scenes content, maybe you want to get some merch, or if you just love what we do and want to support us, I would be thrilled if you considered signing up. The link to the Patreon is in the show notes. And now, on to the interview. Also, thank you to our sponsors at Synergy Associates, the art world tech gurus, for supporting this episode's production at their clubhouse on Pall Mall. You can find more about Synergy and their facilities in the show notes. Welcome to the podcast, Alex.
Thank you.
Could you start us off by giving listeners a sense of your background and how you came to be head of programs at Yorkshire Sculpture Park? I'd love to hear about the path that led you to where you are today.
Yes, well, it's always interesting to think back because in hindsight, everything seems to make sense. But of course, actually, when you're on that journey through your life and your career, you're just taking these opportunities when they arise. And I've been in this role as head of programs for 2 years now. But actually, I've got a much longer history with Yorkshire Sculpture Park. I worked here from 2000 to 2006 as a curator. So I've returned to this place and I'm really, I'm so delighted to have returned here. It was a really formative part of my thinking and my career. So in 2000, I was in my early 20s. It was one of my first jobs and it was really kind of embedded itself in the way I think about working with artists or making projects or whatever I've done actually in the intervening years when I wasn't at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. This wasn't my first job in a museum. I grew up in Stoke-on-Trent, which people might know as the Potteries. My first job working in a museum was actually in the Potteries Museum and Art Gallery. And I worked with the print collection there, but the kind of real strength of the collection there, as you can imagine, is ceramics. So I was surrounded by this incredibly diverse collection of visual art, decorative arts, archaeology. So it was this real immersion in a local museum that was telling a local story. And I loved that job. It was a really early digital project that I was doing. I was digitizing the print collection and not many museums were doing that at the time. So it felt quite pioneering. I did that because I was doing an art history degree. And I think I realized very early on in doing that degree, I didn't just want to be an academic. I really wanted to be working in a museum and gallery and thinking about how to make art public. I think that's probably the uniting thread through all the things that I've done is thinking about working with artists and working with artworks and how we bring them to as many people as possible.
Yeah. And in between your time, did you say 2000 to 2006?
Yes.
That you were at YSP, and now that you've come back to Yorkshire Sculpture Park, I feel like that's kind of a tongue twister at times, like Yorkshire Sculpture Park. There we go. Maybe it's the American accent that makes it a tongue twister. But what did you do in between? Because you also have a PhD. You're Dr. Alexandra Hodby.
Yes, I am. Yes. When I left YSP, you can say YSP, which makes it less of a tongue twister.
Do you also find it a tongue twister though, or not?
Yeah, I guess so. I might say lots of people refer to this place also just as the Sculpture Park because it
the one.
Yeah. Well, for many people it is. We have a really incredible local audience, and so for many people this is a real touchstone place. Some people come here every day. So it's that's not just people who work here, visitors.
That's so funny. Some people come here every day, albeit they're employed, but...
but people visit and are in this landscape every day. So it has a real special resonance for lots of people. And it was quite a hard decision for me to leave in 2006, but I knew I wanted to do a PhD. And I knew that I couldn't do a PhD and also be working as a curator. So it was quite a tough decision, but I knew that if I didn't do it then, I was never going to do it. And so I wanted to find a way to do a PhD. And actually, I didn't leave and do a PhD straight away. I actually left and moved to Newcastle upon Tyne and helped to run an artist studio. And I was kind of doing that job part-time and also seeking a way to do a PhD. And I was incredibly fortunate that I saw kind of advertised, a bit like a job, a collaborative doctoral award, which was hosted between Goldsmiths and Tate Modern.
Oh,
and it
wow.
It was an incredible opportunity. And I was embedded in the public programs team at Tate Modern. And so I got public programs at Tate Modern. At that time, it was really programming that was focused on adult programs. So adults were the primary audience, and lots of the people delivering the program were artists. So it was this really interesting program, artists, academics, filmmakers, all sorts of people, really fascinating. And the area of my research was a very short-lived phenomenon in curatorial kind of studies or theory called new institutionalism. And it was about this time in kind of curatorial practice where the exhibition was no longer kind of at the center of an institution. It was about thinking, well, what happens if we center learning at the heart of an institution? Or what happens if we put communities right at the heart of the institution and then see what happens? It was a way of kind of characterizing a group of people who were trying to be more experimental about how museums and galleries were running. It didn't really last that long as a kind of phenomenon. Or
do you not think? Because I feel like that's now become just part of the discourse.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
So that's kind of what my thesis became. I kind of traced a bit of a history of the public programs at Tate Modern and described how that practice had come about within the institution. I talked about it in relation to exhibition practice and how it differed and how sometimes it was similar and how sometimes it would subvert, the institution itself. I talked a lot about critical practice and how we invite visitors into an institution, not only just to be kind of consumers in a way, but also as active participants. And this is the bit that I really got into, which is how museums and galleries therefore become really active sites in a democracy. So how museums and galleries are places where we're making and remaking our ideas about the world. And so that's kind of what my thesis became about. And I traced in that histories of learning, ways of thinking about how art museums have occupied space in civic society and that kind of thing. So yeah, that was a really fascinating time.
Yeah. I have this later on in my questions, but I do feel like it just fits really well in the conversation that we're having right now, because in the last few years, we've seen a lot of growth, a lot of change within the cultural sector, and also how institutions or how we in the arts talk about land ecology and place, which is actually why we're here today for the exhibition that I'm here on a press trip for, which is how we're getting the opportunity to sit down together. And your research and the research that you've done, at least what I had looked into online as well, involves working with artists in historic or complex contexts and connecting contemporary practice with sites of heritage. And so because we're talking about what you've done within your research when it comes to thinking about institutional approaches to exhibition making and communication and I guess interpretation in a museum, as well as other parts of your research, how have these conversations within your research perhaps shaped your job that you're doing today? How does that seep into it?
I think it seeps into almost everything that I'm doing. So I'm thinking all the time. I guess one of the things I think about a lot is this idea of, site specificity or placemaking.
Yes.
And how artists have tackled that. So particularly, one of the kind of eras of art history that's always influenced me is kind of art made in America in the 60s and the land artists, and how those artists in particular were dealing with the politics of landscape, inhabited landscapes, extraction from landscapes, and how art can make us think about that in lots of very different ways and create the context for those conversations to happen. So not about answering questions, but about a way of finding questions to ask about our existence in the world. And I think that really came through from when I did a master's straight after my first degree. And actually, that was the title of that master's. It wasn't a curatorial master's. It was called Visual Arts and Contemporary Culture. So this was in the late 90s.
Where did you do that?
It was a really short-lived program. It was at Keele University.
Okay.
And it was, I think I just caught this moment that was just, for me, just a perfect fit. So it was kind of taking what had been quite a traditional art history degree, my first degree, and then bringing it right into the contemporary and thinking, well, what is it that's shaping contemporary practice now? We were learning about all sorts of things, from postmodernism to activism to how artists were using the internet, and, how artists and artworks may not exist in museums and galleries, how they exist in communities. And so that massively had an impact on the way I was thinking about wanting to be a curator and working in public. That thread continues, I think, through the career I've had, as well as then influencing what I was looking at in my PhD.
Your PhD, exactly.
So all of this knits together all the time in my work. So my job as head of programs is not just to look after our exhibition program, so not just kind of leading the team of curators. I'm also working all the time with our technical team. So that kind of production and technical aspect of the work is kind of under my supervision, I suppose. Also the learning team.
So you've got 3 different strands. 4.
So
another one's coming.
Another one's coming. So another totally brilliant bit of the areas of Yorkshire Sculpture Park's practices that I help support is our archive. So that's not only Yorkshire Sculpture Park's archive, but also we are the home to what's called the National Arts Education Archive. And that's an archive of material that tells us about how art has been taught, basically over the 20th century. And a major part of that archive is children's artwork. And it's held in context with educators, notes, libraries, lesson plans, writing, academic research as well. So this incredible source of knowledge also sits here and within my kind of sphere of activity.
Wow.
So there's a lot.
You oversee a lot. That's so funny, because my next question was going to be, because YSP is such a distinctive institution, I had wanted to ask you about what makes programming here different from working in a more traditional gallery or museum context. Mm-hmm. And perhaps you've already answered that kind of in the fact that you are sort of overseeing a lot of different areas, as well as this very specific area with the National Art Education Archives.
Yeah, NAEA,
Yeah. So what could be something else that you think is very different, especially looking at your experience?
I think the most obvious thing to say is we're dealing with a lot of space in the open air.
Yeah.
So, we have 3 indoor spaces at the minute that we program for exhibitions. We have a big space that we call the Underground Gallery. That's like our biggest indoor space. We have a historic chapel, very beautiful. It would have been the estate chapel. So for the family and the people who worked here, now converted into a space for art. And we have the Western Gallery, which is another purpose-built gallery, just a single room, but incredibly beautiful space for artwork. And then around that, we've got 500 acres of outdoor space. Now, this outdoor space is complex because these grounds were once basically the gardens of what was a stately home. That stately home in the middle of the 20th century, so just after the Second World War, stopped being a home and started its life as actually a teacher training college and then an arts college. And that's why the National Arts Education Archive is housed here, because that's a kind of a legacy of that centre of learning.
Wow.
And Yorkshire Sculpture Park in 1977 emerged from this kind of educational setting. So one of the people who was teaching there, Peter Murray, our founding director, in 1977 made an exhibition with a group of artists in the open air here in the gardens as a way of exploring what it means to encounter artworks outdoors. It's a very different kind of more, in some ways, you could argue, kind of slightly more liberating way of encountering art rather than being inside a designed gallery space. And that was the start of Yorkshire Sculpture Park. So it came from this place of learning, which I think I'm really committed to through my own work as well. And kind of bringing those things together.
Yeah, that really comes across. Like I hear that very much so.
Yeah. And so, so those roots of Yorkshire Sculpture Park and thinking about making work in the open air, I guess, is a major point of difference than lots of other museums and galleries. Although, of course, lots of other museums and galleries also have open air spaces where they might curate. I think here, though, what we do is we're often working with artists to develop new work.
Yeah.
And I think, that was another one of the reasons why I was really drawn back here, because I don't think any of the other places that I've worked, which we'll come to that in a minute, they had very different opportunities, but not so much grounded in that work with artists all the time. So artists are always influencing our practice, our conversations. They're always in our minds when we're thinking about developing projects. How can we work with an artist? Often when we invite an artist to YSP, we haven't got an outcome in mind. So we might invite an artist to YSP because we're interested in building a relationship with them, and we don't know where that conversation is going to go. It might result in an exhibition, and that exhibition might be in 10 years' time, or it might be in 6 months' time. We can, because of the space we have here and because of the skill of the team, sometimes we can do really rapid response work, which I really love. Often in the art world, we're often programming 2, 3, 4 years in advance because of all sorts of complex reasons.
Loan agreements, budgets, fundraising, shipping,
touring, all of that. Getting all of that lined up. Yeah, because it just takes a long time.
Yeah, of course.
But here, sometimes we can do things really quickly. And that comes from having those really open relationships with artists and conversations. Being able to offer a space here, we're really lucky. We have a tiny bit of accommodation on site. And often in other places I've worked, that's been really prohibitive because a major cost then comes in offering accommodation for someone to stay here. So because we have that, that's already a boundary that we've kind of broken down. So we can offer that space for someone to be here and actually being in this landscape, this historic landscape that I've described, that also has this kind of complex history, having also once been an art college as well. It's a layered history. And now it's a space open to the public. So once was a private garden, a private house, now is open. And because of that, because this was the gardens and the kind of the working landscape to service a house, there's lots of different elements of the landscape here. We've got what once would have been a deer park. We've got what once would have been a kitchen garden. We've got what would have once been the kind of more formal gardens immediately around the house. We've got 2 big lakes.
And you do have sheep.
The sheep.
There are sheep, people. There are sheep.
There's a lot of, and then another layer is our kind of our co-inhabitants of this landscape, the sheep being one, but the wildlife, we have a lot of historic trees here. So, these are veteran trees, which are, they have to reach a certain age.
Hundreds of years old.
Yeah. So there's all of these elements come together here. And all of that also influences our practice and choices and thinking as curators, as kind of, not just curators, but the whole of the team at Yorkshire Sculpture Park, because we have an estates team, of course, because we need to look after this landscape. We're custodians of this landscape.
Yeah.
And so we're thinking about art and nature and people continually. So there's that, all of that together offers opportunities and challenges all the time.
Yeah. I think it's really lovely that you guys, within your 49-year history, nearly 50, which is very exciting, YSP is very known for its artist relationships, because I think you've worked with over 1,000 artists within these last 49 years. Yeah. Some of them at the beginning of their career and some of them, very established. And so I wonder, you did sort of touch on how you maintain those relationships. You also have the practical side of things, like you offer accommodation. But how do you think, your program sort of evolves over time with these relationships with different artists.
But that's the joy. I mean, and that's why I like working here, because you cannot predict what that evolution's going to be. So, I mean, a good story to tell about the Sculpture Park is that this was a very early place in the career of Andy Goldsworthy and David Nash. You know, they were here as young artists. And I suppose that idea is always in our minds. I continue to speak both to Andy and David, or, you know, we do as a curatorial team, so that relationship continues. So I think we're always mindful, okay, we still need to be having conversations with young artists, because in the next 50 years, we don't know where that conversation is going to go. So I think we feel the responsibility, but also the joy and the gift of that, because then talking to artists who've had that long relationship with Yorkshire Sculpture Park, we know what a profound impact working in and around this landscape with the team here, solving problems. I mean, I think it's not to be underestimated how much of anyone's career in the arts is actually mainly about solving problems. So, you know,
you have to MacGyver a lot of situations.
Absolutely. From the micro to the macro.
Yes.
And going on that journey with an artist, but you have to have a lot of trust. You're building a lot of trust. And so all of that all the time, I just find that totally joyous, because you're with people, you're kind of doing it together. And I think that's just an incredible experience to have.
I think building trust is a really big one that I hear a lot when people work with artists. Like, it is really about that relationship and trust with each other. But I think that's one of the most important aspects of working together within the art world, within the creative industry.
Yeah. And I think my experience of working with artists also, you know, when artists are making artwork and making exhibitions, that takes a lot of courage and a lot of commitment. And I think honouring that and being able to provide the platform for that to happen in the best possible way, I think I feel the responsibility of that, but also I also enjoy that. I enjoy making that happen for someone and creating that environment where someone can flourish into that space.
Yes. And so now we've just covered sort of what it means to have these relationships with artists and giving them these opportunities, working together with them. The outdoor setting at YSP also means that accessibility, I guess, from both a physical as well as a conceptual standpoint, is always a part of the conversation that you're having. So as we're thinking about accessibility for audiences, what does that term mean to you when we think about access within this context?
I think particularly here, I think about it in the broadest possible sense, because actually getting around this landscape is hard.
I have yet to experience it, but I'm very excited to go experience it in the pouring rain now.
Well, yeah, as long as you've got the right shoes on, it's totally fine. And actually, we've invested over the years and decades. There's been lots of investment in pathways and people being able to explore this landscape for themselves. But also, we wanted to hold true to the fact that we didn't want to give people prescribed route around this landscape. You know, we want to open it to people so you can kind of wander anywhere.
But 500 acres is big.
Yeah.
That is a lot. Yeah. And I think that, like, for people who come up here, I will say, there's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing. Please bring, if it's rainy, bring your rain boots, bring your raincoat, and grab a map, wander around, like, take your time, explore.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the invitation.
Yes.
And seeing the work in the snow here is incredible. Seeing it in kind of misty conditions, incredible. Ooh. Seeing it in the rain is actually beautiful because it changes the surface of sculptures. So I would say, no weather is bad weather here. It actually just changes the experience. And I think, there's a work here by Andy Goldsworthy, which is a shadow stone that is only really activated if it's raining or if there's a change in the weather. You lie on it, and if it was to kind of rain onto your body, you then get up and the imprint of your body is left there. So there's some things here that absolutely depend on the weather changing. So we totally lean into that.
Yeah.
And we have to think about it when we're curating. We're thinking about the seasons. We're thinking about changes in weather. We're thinking about how people are going to reach things. If you come here and you'll have a physical accessibility issue, there are freely available all-terrain wheelchairs. So you can get around pretty much all of this landscape on one of them. It's quite...
on an all-terrain wheelchair?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing.
So things like that, which are kind of very practical, kind of quite real accessibility things we can do.
But that's a big concern. That's something that, someone listening in might be like, well, how am I supposed to explore these grounds if I have a physical disability and need a wheelchair? Well, Yorkshire Sculpture Park has your back.
Yeah. all you need to do, you can book them freely online. So if you need that, you can do that in advance. And then with my team, who are really committed to access, we're thinking all the time about how we can constantly improve things. I think as a baseline, having sculpture outdoors in itself makes art quite accessible. And we know we have lots of visitors here that don't go to other museums and galleries. But here they feel quite safe because being in a parkland feels more familiar than being, say, in a museum building. And we love that. And we have lots of family visitors. So we have lots of activities for younger visitors or intergenerational groups of visitors to do together. And in our galleries, we have lots of what I like to call non-text-based interpretation. So that's things that can be handled or materials that might be similar to the materials in the artworks that you can touch or kind of manipulate. So I think one of the things we're really conscious of is thinking about not assuming that anyone's going to come here with an art historical knowledge, but actually they might come with a knowledge of weaving, or they might come with a knowledge of working with rope or with wool or with clay. And actually, if we can bring people to sculpture through their own knowledge and then bring them into an understanding of the sculpture that we're showing that way, that for me feels like, I hope, an accessible way of approaching artworks. And then we do great work we've got great partnerships. I think accessibility for me is built through great partnerships with other experts in accessibility. I cannot pretend that we get it right all the time, and I don't think anyone does. So I think what you have to do is say that we're always learning. And so working in partnership we've got great partners that help us with British Sign Language tours. We've recently been able to really activate doing audio description as well. And I think that's been a real exciting learning journey, not only making that available to our visitors, but also in the people who are learning how to audio describe, because that is a whole different way of looking and thinking and communicating about art for everyone, including us who are the experts in inverted commas.
And you have to do that on a podcast. You can't just raise your fingers.
So I'm thinking about that all the time. And I think also we have great community partners. So my colleagues in the learning team are often working with individuals who come to us who have additional needs, or we have lots and increasing numbers of our groups who visit from schools, have increasing numbers of children who have additional needs within mainstream education, which is fantastic. But we're really mindful that we need to offer additional support to those groups. So we're building that into our programs and our thinking and our design of workshops, that we have quiet spaces or sensory kits that we can deploy. And I think because we're always working with the idea of sculpture and 3 dimensions, I think we're really embracing how we can engage with that and develop our own materials for the gallery spaces or for groups that come as well. So it's a constant journey. And I think actually when we make exhibitions, sometimes they offer up their own ways of thinking about access and accessibility on a physical and a conceptual level. So in the Western Gallery at the minute, we've got artwork by L.R. Vandy. Main material in this show is rope. And so understanding from Lisa how she works with rope, what it means to her as an artist to handle that material, how she's manipulating it, that influences the way that we think about our handling materials, how we're bringing people to that artwork through an idea of making. So not through a kind of an intellectual journey, but more through a kind of the artist's journey and exploration. Similarly with Nicola Turner, whose show is in the chapel at the minute, the principal material in that show is sheep's wool. Mm-hmm. So this is a very familiar material.
Yep.
And particularly if you've walked through the landscape to get to the chapel, you will have seen sheep in the landscape. And so that material kind of suddenly morphs into this interior space.
Yeah.
And both Lisa and Nicola have made that work here. This is a whole other thing at Yorkshire Sculpture Park. We're able to support artists to make work.
Did they use the sheep's wool from here?
From here? No, we couldn't because it wasn't quite the right time of year.
Right.
But we sourced
But you could have if it would have been.
But we investigated that because it's, of course, a very seasonal thing. We're able to source wool locally.
Yeah.
Through that conversation with farmers. I mean, this is what we're doing. We're not.
This is what the head of programs does.
Yeah. It's not this is the problem solving thing that I was talking about. You want work to have authenticity, integrity, not just in the concept, but in the materials and the making and
in the process, in the creation, all of it.
Yeah. And I think you can feel both in Lisa and Nicola's shows, you can feel that connection to this place and the fact that it's been made here. And, our incredible technical team have supported those artists to make this work at scale. And,
Yeah.
it's a real meeting halfway of working with the artists and their skills and knowledge and bringing our technical know-how to that and kind of making all that work together.
Yeah.
Which comes back to exactly that thing about trust, relationships. And
exactly. Well, and what I'm also hearing about access is that it's not necessarily about getting it right 100% of the time and being perfect, but instead doing it right is listening and learning and working together with the new information that you get with every single new experience that you're having.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why conversations with our visitors are so important.
Yeah.
Evaluation with our visitors is so important because additional access needs are emerging all the time.
Yeah.
It's not a static thing. It's a constantly emerging thing.
And I guess for anyone listening in who's maybe interested in this sort of area and working in this area, it's really good to know how to sort of achieve that and how to sort of wrap your mind around the process of doing something like that. And I guess for anyone listening in who's also interested in working in like an outdoor arts organization or perhaps more specifically in programming, which I think sounds like a really incredibly like creative and rewarding profession, but also a big problem-solving profession. In your opinion, what skills or sensibilities do you think are particularly important in the role that you do?
Yeah, I think it's funny the role I do because it kind of morphs. And so I think it's that adaptability to be able to kind of meet people where they are. When I say people, I mean artists, or it could be my colleagues or members of my team. So being able to adapt and mold yourself into what's needed at that moment. So that skill of recognition, of listening, I think is massively important. One of the most profound experiences of my professional life was training to be a coach.
Oh.
So that...
Wait, what kind of coach?
So it was a coaching qualification that's mainly grounded in active listening.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a process of helping people kind of identify and articulate their goals. It's all based in conversation, but that conversation comes from a process of listening and reflecting back what you're hearing. I mean, it sounds a very straightforward thing. It's really hard to hold that space.
Yeah.
So for me, that training is something that I think has affected and impacted my professional life really profoundly.
Yeah. That's really interesting to hear. It makes me want to maybe after this episode, I'll ask you more about that, because I think when we think about team leaders or people who kind of, I guess for you manage multiple teams and multiple people, and you also need to have some sort of management skills. And I guess with a coaching qualification, that plays into that. It's exactly about, I think I was reading a book recently, and within it, it's about habits and that sort of kind of, I guess, popular psychology, right? And what I found really interesting is the way that the author was describing how we make decisions. And we make decisions not based on quote unquote logic, and not based, because logic is not necessarily a thing in itself. It's very tied to emotion. The way that we logically deduce whether something is good or bad is based on our emotions towards a particular thing or subject or experience. And so when people think, oh, logic versus emotion, that's actually just not a thing. Ultimately, all of the decisions that we make and how we function through life is through how we feel. That's how we proceed. And so having these soft skills and knowing how to coach people, how to listen, how to hold that space, that's incredibly important. And not enough people know how to do that, who then end up running teams. And that's why I recently have these stats in my head because of a recent report that came out from the Association of Women in the Arts in London. And over 50% of like mid-career female arts professionals between the ages of 35 and 44 are wanting to leave the sector. And it's because they don't see a way up, or they're not being managed correctly, or like they don't see progression. And that, I mean, maybe I'm sort of being really reductive here, but I do think that when someone comes with a sort of deeper understanding of what it means to coach and guide, be a leader, that will make a difference in if someone stays or leaves an industry, I think.
Yeah, I mean, and this, this is part going back to where we started this conversation. This kind of happened between my working life, once being at Yorkshire Sculpture Park and then coming back.
Yeah.
So one of the things I did was train as a coach. The other thing I think that had a massively profound impact on me, when I was doing my PhD, I did a lot of teaching. So I taught about curating at Tate. They ran this incredible set of modules, which half of the group of people I was teaching were doing an MA at King's, and half of the group could be anyone, like just booking onto a course at Tate. So I had 40 people in the room, mainly not from the UK, coming together. So I had like curators, choreographers, people who were working in the cultural departments of embassies. I had architects, designers.
Oh my God.
So there was this incredible cohort for people. And I would say that experience of teaching, and to repeat back a phrase you used, which was about holding space.
Yeah.
So holding space for 40 people over a 10-week course was that I learned so much in doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think so coaching and teaching, quite closely aligned things, I think massively impactful. So yeah, I think thinking about the skills that I developed, not just working as a curator, but also doing these kind of adjacent things to working in museums and galleries were massively impactful. Then when I'd done my PhD, I'd spent a little stint as a research curator at Sheffield Museums. And then I worked for a number of years at Chatsworth. So that was a whole different experience, working with a historic collection in a historic house, also doing some work outdoors as well, but also working with artists and artworks into that heritage setting. And so the sum of that, not only kind of getting experience in these different kinds of museums and institutions, but also having that teaching and also having training to be a coach, kind of all mixed in. The other thing I did, which I think I would recommend people do, or would be to be a trustee of an organisation.
I'm trying to be a trustee, actually. I'm applying to different places because I've heard that. Yeah. I want to be one.
Yeah, it gives you an insight into an organisation which you don't get as an employee of an organisation. It gives you an insight into leadership and governance as well, which is a slightly different thing because that's more about like the systems of an organisation. I've been lucky enough to be a trustee, or kind of, if a trustee group didn't exist, like on an advisory board type arrangement with an organisation. And I think also those insights that I got into not only how one bit of an organisation might work, but an oversight of how a whole organisation is holding together. That's really helped me massively.
Yeah, I'm trying. I'm looking at open calls and things like that. I haven't seen any that I'm particularly interested. There was one for the Liverpool Biennial, but I am based in London and it would be kind of hard for me to get up to Liverpool. But yeah, I'm looking for that exactly for that reason. So it actually feels really good to hear you reassure that and say like, that is a really good step.
I learned so much. And of course, you're also learning from your co-trustees who also have incredible experience. So you're kind of getting a bit of mentorship where, just by being in the same space as these people. So, and just learning and absorbing. So if you go in with that kind of attitude and that idea, right, I'm going to learn from this. Actually, you're giving a lot then to the organisation because you're often asking really good questions, but also you're kind of absorbing and taking in so much from that experience.
Yeah. Well, Alex, I want to ask you a final question to wrap up the episode. And I like to ask all of my guests this on the podcast. If you could pick one artist from art history to have dinner with, who would it be and why?
Well, I've been thinking about this question because I know
everyone always does.
Okay, so I'm going to slightly sidestep. I didn't know what I was going to say here because I just thought I would say the artist that just spoke to me in that moment because there's so many. But actually, I'm going to talk about the artists that we're working with right now because I am actually going to have dinner with them. And I think that is the most incredible privilege that's part of this job, is that you get that time with artists. So we're about to open an exhibition called Hold to This Earth. It's a group show. It's the first group show that we've made in our biggest gallery, the Underground Gallery, and in the open air. There are 38 artists in this exhibition. We've worked really closely in partnership with Tier Collection, which is this incredible collection of artworks who have their collection centre in Santa Fe in the USA. And one of the strengths of that collection is contemporary Indigenous North American artworks. And we've been lucky enough to create this exhibition with them. Most of the artists who are in the show are living, and we've been able to bring many of them to Yorkshire Sculpture Park. And so tonight we're going to have dinner with 12 of these artists. And so for me, those 12 artists that are part of this show, bringing them here from North America, being able to have conversations with them about their artwork, about how they make art, about their kind of insights into the contemporary art world from where they sit, totally brilliant. So My answer to your question is I'm actually having dinner with a group of artists tonight that we've been working with for actually we've turned the show around really quickly. It's about 18 months, but the conversations and the kind of community that we've built there. So I'm not answering your question very well.
You're answering it in a beautiful and also incredibly original way, because I don't think I've ever asked anyone that and they say, oh, I'm actually going to have dinner with 12 amazing, impressive, wonderful artists this evening who are in this exhibition. And like, I'm really, it's great for me to hear that because I had the privilege of meeting some of them earlier today and seeing the exhibition. It was incredibly powerful. It's on until I think 18th of April, 2027,
Yes.
off the top of my head.
Yes, I think you're about right there. Yes, good.
Something like that. Look, I'll put the link in the show notes for anyone who's interested. But no, that's an incredibly perfect answer. Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
And that is it for today on All About Art. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave me a rating or a review, as it helps more people discover the show. Also, feel free to share with your friends, or if you share on social media, tag me and get in touch. Thank you so much for listening.